If you struggle with editing your wedding, portrait, event photos fast enough, this video is for you. So tip number 1, make your Lightroom faster by generating right previews and just setting it up correctly for your work. And here is how my workflow might be different from yours. So this step can vary depending if you're culling your images before importing to Lightroom, or maybe you cull them inside of Lightroom. So I personally cull my images outside of Lightroom. So I cull them first and then I import them to Lightroom. The reason why I do it is I'm just used to the tools that I've been using for years. So for me, it's Photo Mechanic and Narrative Select. So for example, Narrative Select gives me this helpful zoomed view on people's faces, which makes choosing the best group photos from a wedding so much easier. If you want to try it out, I'm going to link the Narrative Select in the description. It's a free tool. There's a free plan, which has like most of the features that I'm actually using. And then when my images are culled, I only import the selection of the images to the edit, right? So much less photos than the entire set. So for example, at a wedding, I shoot around 6,000 photos. And then after culling, I'm left with around 800 to 1,000. And that's what I'm going to import to Lightroom, meaning much shorter time of generating previews. And the only previews I actually generate are smart previews. So these are the ones that are used for faster editing. If you want to benefit from faster editing, you need to build smart previews, and then you need to enable editing using smart previews in your Lightroom settings under the Performance tab. This is massive. Make sure you do it. You'll see performance boost right away. But there's also an option to generate other types of previews, and I feel like a lot of time people confuse those previews. So the previews on the right top when you import images that you can choose are minimal previews or one-to-one previews or standard previews, and you might be thinking whether you need them or not. And let me tell you that these are only for library module. So you need to ask yourself a question whether you use library module at all. Because if you're, for example, culling in library module, or reviewing your images, zooming in and out, you might find generating these previews really worth for you, because you will not be waiting for Lightroom to generate previews each time you zoom in. And then you kind of don't need to generate them at all if you only use Lightroom in Develop module. And here's my take on which previews to use depending on your workflow and how you work. So first option is embedded/sidecar. This is the fastest way to get your images quickly viewable in Lightroom. It doesn't generate any new previews. It just uses the previews that are built into the raw files from your camera. So it works kind of just like Photo Mechanic. It's going to be super fast and you'll be able to cull the images quickly, but you will not be able to zoom in quickly, nor it will not reflect any of your edits. But if you just cull in Lightroom, you can use that. Then you have one-to-one previews. So these takes the longest time to generate, and they also take a lot of space on your hard drive. But these allow you to use library modules super fast when they're generated. So you can zoom in and out without any waiting time, without any rendering info on the bottom of your screen. But then I'd only recommend them if you really spend a lot of time in your library module, zooming in, judging sharpness, maybe details, and so on. So if you're that type of photographer, definitely generate these previews. Then you have standard previews. So these are kind of these medium-sized previews for smooth preview in library module, but without necessarily the option to zoom in that quickly. They are different from embedded and sidecar because they load with Adobe Profile, and I don't see much value of using them unless you import photos with your preset. So depending on how you use library module, you may decide whether you want to generate one-on-one standard, or you don't want to generate them at all and just use embedded previews. Again, if you don't care about library module at all, which is kind of my case, just go with embedded and stay with smart previews for faster editing. One more note here, if you decide to generate those previews, like smart previews or one-on-one previews, if they take like really a lot of time on your computer, it might mean you need to upgrade your machine, because building previews, at least now at this version of Lightroom, they are purely CPU-based processes, meaning the faster your processor is, the newer your computer is, the more core it has, the faster the generating previews process will be. Tip number 2, take better photos. And when I say take better photos, I mean pay attention to the details. This includes observing how light falls on your subject, how you're positioning yourself in the environment, or how you pose your subject to get a photo. And the goal is to get it as close to perfect as possible straight out of camera, because then the editing is going to be easy mode. Take this wedding portrait, for example. I shot 2 of them in the same spot, but the initial pose, it's okay, as you can see, but notice how the light fades on the left side of the face, making the eye appear darker. It's really subtle when you look through viewfinder because it's a raw image, but when you start editing and you start adding contrast or color, it does become more noticeable, and sometimes it does require additional time to fix, like putting mask on it or something. And now look at the second photo. All I did was I asked the model to turn her face slightly towards the right, and boom, this image is like ready. I just apply the edit and it's done. No need for extra adjustments or masks to even out the lighting because it's perfect. So being intentional about how the light falls on your subjects will dramatically reduce your editing time. And the same principle applies to your surroundings. And think of getting ready rooms at weddings, often full of clutter like clothes, makeup trash, and random items on the tables. Isn't it always the case? And if you take just 2 or 3 minutes to tidy up with the help, hopefully, of some bridesmaids, you'll save tens of minutes later on. You don't have to edit any distractions out or crop the images because there's a trash in the corner. So this attention to details make a huge difference, and it's one of the most common notes I actually give to people when I review other photographers' work. If you would like personalized feedback on your wedding photography, I currently have 4 slots left for February. I'll take your full Lightroom catalog from a wedding and provide detailed feedback in pre-recorded 45-minute video. You can find the link in the description and use code MAGICSENDME at checkout to save $30 on this. Tip number 3, use keyboard shortcuts or devices like these or like other types of consoles. At the end of the day, if we're editing hundreds of photos from each wedding, the editing comes down to few similar adjustments, and it's kind of muscle memory. What are you changing? We use the same sliders and tools like masking or cropping, and while Lightroom itself does offer some keyboard shortcut functionality, it's not actually the best. One of the most popular tools I've seen around is called LR Super Keys, so Lightroom Super Keys, and it lets you fully customize keyboard shortcuts for pretty much every single Lightroom adjustment. And you can simply edit by pressing and holding the button on your keyboard, like Q for exposure, and then by moving your mouse up and down to change the value. That's so much faster than moving sliders manually. And if you prefer manual devices, you can get something like this. This is my recent favorite, Logitech MX Creative Console, that I've been using since I bought it at launch, and it's been amazing for me. I found a really good workflow on this, and before that I used this Monogram console for like 2 years, and also I loved the sliders and how they feel. So if you're more like manual and you want some device, you can look into any of the consoles like these, or you can use keyboard shortcuts. Either way, this is going to dramatically help you edit faster. You just need to take time to learn it and to, for muscle memory to kick in. If you want to watch the review of this device, this is like the newest device. It's on my channel. I will link it up in the description. Tip number 4, use presets. Either buy or create or modify them and use AI editing tools. These can help out shorten your editing time dramatically. If you have your basic look of your images, save it as a preset, or get someone else's preset, tweak it, and then save it. If you constantly find yourself doing the same clarity adjustment on the portrait, or even the same mask where you lower clarity, for example, you can save this as a preset as well. So you can either save entire edit of the photo as a preset or just part of it just like mask. It's as easy as pressing the plus button in your Lightroom on preset menu on the left and choosing which settings from the image you just edited you want to save as a preset. And for example, I personally have my cooling the background preset or darkening the sky preset. I also have my 3 main presets. 2 of them are for color images, 1 of them is for black and white, and some quick tools to add or remove grain. So the stuff that I use the most, I have it set as presets. And then when I edit full weddings, I also use the help of AI. I use a tool called Imagine, and it basically learns how I edit my images based on the photos I submitted, and it does it for me in like no time. Editing 1000 photos takes literally like around 10 minutes, and they're back in your Lightroom for manual review and final adjustments, which for me take around 2 hours per wedding. The price for editing 1000 photos is around $50–60 depending if you use any additional features like automatic cropping or auto masking, which I think it's really fair price for wedding photography editing. When I was outsourcing my editing back in the day, for like to real life editors, like it was few times more expensive and never this fast. So I highly recommend trying out something like this in your workflow. If you're curious to try it out, I offer both my preset pack, which can be purchased on its own or bundled with the editing masterclass. And additionally, you can also get the preset pack with my Imagine AI profile that is built from my 15,000 of edited photos. So it just edits like I edit. So if you want, check it out. The link is in the description. And the last final tip number 5, stop procrastinating. And the biggest thing slowing your editing down is you constantly checking your social media, watching reels, or reading another juicy Facebook post in your local wedding photography group. I've worked with friends in the same office and I've seen how easily they get distracted and struggle to get things done. And the same goes for me, to be honest. On some days, I just can't get the editing done in one sitting. It's just a mood thing for me. But don't worry, I actually have got solutions for us. One thing that actually worked for me really well is using a time management and productivity application on my computer. The one I use is called Rise, and it literally tracks everything I'm doing on my computer, sorts it into categories, and gives me stats. And trust me, there's nothing more motivating and honestly a little bit depressing than seeing the stats of your day after spending, hours at your computer editing photos, only to find out you actually spent only 4 hours at your computer, not entire day, and then only 2 hours of these 4 were editing, and seeing that you spend the rest of that time watching YouTube, reading the news, or doing 10 other small tasks that added up to the hours. It's actually a really wake-up call. And if you really struggle, Rise also has a timer to help you manage your work sessions. So what works for me, and I actually used to use manual timer for that as well, is breaking my work into 45 minutes focus sessions followed by 15-minute breaks. So seeing the timer counting down really helped me stay focused and productive. And then I had my 15-minute break time where I could spend this reading the news or watching YouTube video. Give it a try and see how productive you actually are during your working sessions. If this was helpful, make sure to leave the thumbs up, subscribe, and comment your favorite tips to speed up your workflow. And I will see you soon in the next video. Ciao, bye.